And good evening. Welcome to the Kansas Legislature here on Smoky Hills PBS from Bunker Hill. I'm your host, Becky Kaiser. I'm with Eagle Communications, a news reporter for Hays Post and Eagle Radio in Hays, and I am also a fellow with the Docking Institute at Fort Hays State University. We have a full house tonight. We're so happy to have our special guests. I'm going to introduce them first, and then we'll come back and have everybody talk a little bit about the committees that they're on and some of the special topics. Haven't gotten too much underway yet, but it's amazing how many bills have already been introduced. On my far right, Senator Rick Billinger, of course, who is from Goodland, the 40th District, and sitting next to him, of course, is Senator Elaine Bowers, who's from Concordia, District number 36. And then to my far left, of course, a familiar face in this area, Representative Troy Waymaster, who is from District 109, Bunker Hill, and also joining us this evening is I just about gave you a promotion there, Representative Ken Rahjes, who is from Agra, District 110. Let's go back and start with you, Rick, if you will, and remind everybody the committees that you're on and what you're working on this session.
Thank you, Becky. I serve on the Senate Ways and Means, which is primarily the budget. So I work on that in the Senate side. I don't serve in any other standing committees. I'm on numerous committees that, like the 911 Council, Disabilities Concerns, and those type of committees that meet periodically through the year. As far as what we've been working on so far, we're working on the budget. We've reported out about a fourth of our subcommittees, and we're scheduled to have the bill ready to come out of our committee on day 56, which I believe is March 7th, and then we'll run it on the floor the following week, which is same amount of days that we did last year.
All right, Senator.
Well, thank you, Becky. It's always very nice to be here with some of my most favorite people from rural Kansas. I serve on 4 committees and started 8:30 with transportation. In real life, I'm a GM dealer, so a business owner, so I fit just perfect there. Transparency and Ethics is a committee that I chair. We do 19 little fee fund budgets for Rick, so we're his subcommittee that send them to the big committee. That's what we've been working on in that committee. And Vice Chair of Local Government, I really do enjoy that committee because we do talk about items that are really local to us and important. After lunch is Judiciary, and there's a variety of topics that we're just getting started here in agency reports in there. And then I also serve on Utilities. And that's very interesting to me with all of our electric rural co-ops, our wind turbines, all of the items that we talk about across the state, but particularly pay attention to rural Kansas.
Involves quite a bit. All right, thank you. And let's talk about your committees, Representative Waymaster.
All right, well, thank you, Becky, thank you for having us here. Like Rick, I'm the chairman of the Appropriations Committee on the House, which that is the only committee that I serve on, due to the fact that that's the committee that crafts the budget for the House of Representatives. And so during the interim, I do serve, and as Rick does, on the State Finance Council. We also have the Legislative Budget Committee, which he and I share between the chairmanships. And then I've been on many task force as far as early child care, also on the wildfire task force that Elaine and I have served on ever since the governor basically had that committee set after the 4-county fire that occurred in the district that we serve. And then I also served on the Build Kansas committee. Which is one that we put into place last year in the budget, and this is to draw down more federal dollars for the bipartisan infrastructure law for communities, counties, cities across the state of Kansas. And we've had, I think, 5 applications so far that we have forwarded on to the federal government.
All right. And Representative Rahjes, your committees.
I'm not near as busy as these are. So. Well, Becky, it's always great to see you, and I think usually, I think every season, the last several years, Representative Waymaster and I have kind of kicked this thing off, so we had to add the Senate to make sure to make it fair and balanced.
Sure.
Maybe is that it? But I serve as chairman of the Agriculture and Natural Resources Committee. I've done that now for several years, and also serve the Appropriations Committee, and in the Budget Committee I am on is higher education, and been on that now for several years, a past chairman of that. So and also was recently appointed to the special claims against the state. And so that's an interesting thing, but it gives an opportunity for folks, that maybe do have a claim against the state. This is kind of the last resort that they have, and so it's a lot of trips back and forth, to Topeka in the off session as well. But it gives us a chance to serve.
Well, we appreciate all of you and your time and for being with us this evening. And again, a reminder that if you have a question of any of our guests this evening or a comment that you would like to make, we have a toll-free number that you can call. That's 1-800-337-4788, and we'll be glad to take your calls. Well, Senator Billinger, I think we probably should start off with the budget. That's always the big, a big task, of course, and you've been working on it for a while. Where do we stand so far?
So far we've done pretty much the small stuff, which, like Elaine said, she's done 10 or so of them for us already.
You have 5 more.
5 more coming, okay. And this next week here we will have higher ed budget, and that'll be on I think the 9th, or no, it's on the 7th. And then the following week we'll have the continuation of that. The president of K-State and the chancellor of KU were unable to come on the day that we're doing the rest of the universities, so they're coming the following, I believe, Monday. So we'll be working on that. The corrections, we've not reported out on corrections, but we've worked on corrections. They're wanting a new prison in Hutchinson. It's approximately $377 million project.
Is that because of the one that's deteriorating, or do we need more space for the prison, an expanding prison population?
It's to replace an outdated facility that is really, it's very, very old and doesn't meet code, and there's numerous issues with it, and so it's time to build a new facility. And when we build a new facility, we had built one in Lansing a few years ago, and one of the things that you get nowadays is the high tech, so you have more cameras, so it takes less people to watch folks, and have the automatic locks on the doors and so forth. And so hopefully, once we get into a new facility, it'll save us some money on personnel, because we're always short on employees, especially at the prisons. We've had, Troy and I worked on several pay plans and 24/7 and many times just to try to get staffed. One of the things I do want to mention that's going on at the prisons is a private partnership with the prisons to come in and put in facilities where they can build things and train the prisoners, so they have a trait and they're qualified when they get out of prison. And one of the things they do there in Hutchinson, they make seats for garden tractors.
Huh.
Last year they made 500,000 seats
Oh my God.
at the prison in Hutchinson. It's just a great deal. They get paid a standard wage. The first thing they do is they take money out of their paychecks and it goes into a savings account. The second thing they do, they have to pay restitution for any fees or anything like that, child support, anything like that, and get all that behind them, and then they have money to purchase items there at the canteen at the prison. So they're very good programs. The one over at Stockton and one at Norton are very active in getting folks to work in the communities. I know in Norton, the city and the county both employ them, and at Stockton they bus them down to Wilkins walking trailers. These guys are learning how to be welders. They're busing them to Hayes. They're working there at the tank service or building oil field tanks. So they've learned how to weld, and same thing. They're getting them onto a good foot, so when they get out of prison, they're not just handing them $50 and a bus ticket and say good luck. These guys they're qualified to continue to make a good living.
Well, it not only helps them, but society that they're coming back into in general. Troy, maybe you want to talk about this a little bit more about the budget. I think it was today we got some news from the state that the tax collections were not as high as
High.
expected.
Right.
And I think this was the third or fourth month consecutively, yet we've been talking about the surplus that the Kansas budget has had, fortunately. Are we still to the good? Are you
Oh, no,
worried about
we're
it?
still to the good. I mean, you look at the approved budget that we passed last year for fiscal year 2024, which is the budget that we're in right now. I mean, we have a projected ending balance still at $2.8 billion. And that's even taking aside from the adjustments that were made in November by the Consensus Revenue Estimate Group and the months that we have just, and I wouldn't say we overly missed those expectations or those estimates, but we have missed them. But one of the things that we have to look for, I mean, you look at the budget that was submitted by Governor Kelly when we had the joint meeting with the Ways and Means and the Appropriations Committee on the Thursday after the governor gave her State of the State speech. And I mean, this was kind of an anomaly compared to her other budgets because she had an increased amount of spending in her budget. $1.3 billion in spending was in her budget. Now, in prior years, she had not accounted for a lot of the things that we had to address. And so then with the legislature would come back and put money towards those particular items, and then she would go and make a public statement when she signed the budget and said, well, you know, I sent them a balanced budget. However, they spent more than what my budget was. This year is a little bit different, and I think it has to do with something with a tax plan as to the reason why. And Rick was talking about the $377 million for the new Hutchinson Correctional Facility. And granted, yes, it probably is outdated. It is jeopardizing our staff. And we probably do need to build a new facility. But to take $377 million and pay for it in cash has been something the state has never done. And so one thing that Rick and I have talked about, and I believe your committee has already passed it out, or your subcommittee, is instead of taking that out of the ending balance, we're actually going to take that and bond it, like we would any other massive project throughout the state of Kansas. One of the other items in our budget, which to me and to leadership, and I think to Senator Billinger as well and others, makes absolutely no sense, is that she was taking $450 million to pay down the pension obligation bonds, but it's not actually paying the bonds down. It's actually putting the money aside in an escrow account, and when those bonds become callable, then it pays it off, which is years out down the road. And so I think when you're looking at the budget that the governor submitted to the legislature, it's quite apparent that it was, let's do all this spending so they cannot sustain the tax plan that we have going forward, and most likely going to be having the veto override on Tuesday.
What is the status of a flat tax plan that has been talked about? I maybe brought up for the first time in a while last year, and then I know it's been discussed this year already.
Well, it was vetoed by the governor. It passed by the House and the Senate, and then sent to the governor. She vetoed it last Friday, and we are set to take up the veto override on Tuesday.
Okay.
To see exactly if we can have enough numbers. I think in the House, I think we have the numbers in the House. I mean, Ken, I don't. I think we do have the numbers. The Senate is the questionable chamber, whether or not we have enough.
And it's more than just flat tax. I mean, that's kind of the center.
Well, yeah, it has a lot of her tax
the
plan.
centerpiece, and so this, I would guess this is probably one of the most bipartisan tax packages we've had. You know, we've talked about no income tax on Social Security recipients. That's in there. We've raised the first $100,000 now of your home valuation before the tax starts. So I mean, there's a number of different things. There's a number of provisions in there, and so I think it's very easy. It's very easy to say, well, any sort of a tax break is only going to one class. What we have found in our analysis with this is the governor, about 30-some thousand, would not pay tax. Now, with our plan, with the Republican plan that has passed, an additional 310,000 Kansans, Becky, will not pay income tax. Now, before the session started, you know, the flat tax proposal and tax relief is what people wanted. This is one thing. The other thing we have to work on is property tax relief. That's the biggest thing that we have heard of, is folks want a break. They want a break on their homes, they want a break on that property tax, and so let's hope that once this gets done, we can do that. We worked on it last year. It is time to get it done. And so I hope both sides can come together and get that and not wait till the last possible minute to get it done. Kansans need this. We do not need to be keeping almost $3 billion in reserves for what? It's the people's money.
You have, and I've heard you say this repeatedly, that for whatever reason it gets put off until the very end. Why do you think that is? Is it that controversial, or why do we wait till the very end on what's such a key part of our budget?
I think, one, because it's such a huge part of our budget, there's a lot of wrangling that goes on in order to get the votes. And so you whatever, for lack of a better term, you kind of Christmas tree it up. You want to add a bunch of things to get people's votes. And so, but that's what happens. You put the pressure on right at the end. So if you want something, we put that on there together. But it's also very complex, and so it's not as easy to say, okay, in January, first part of February, we pass a massive major bill. There's a lot of other things maybe that you want to get done, but that's the big part of it, that you try to bring a lot of things together to get as many votes as possible, at least enough to probably either get it passed and have enough for a veto-proof majority.
Well, and I was going to add to that. I mean, never have we had a tax package voted on the first time in the legislative session in both chambers.
And remember, we're in the second year of a 2-year cycle.
That's right.
So these items have been left over, vetoed, put back in together as a package with a lot of topics and not just one. So that's exciting. It's also adjusting for inflation, which we've not done before. So a silent tax, if you want to say that, and the food sales tax goes away totally, except for our
And
local.
I was going to mention that because and the rhetoric that is coming from the governor's office in regards to how costly the Republican tax plan is, well, they're factoring in that the elimination of the food sales tax on the state level is going to be happening on January 1, 2025. And we're just accelerating it like she wanted to.
Yes.
And so that's already factored in, but they're throwing that into the cost factor and saying, oh, it's too expensive. And, you know, Representative Smith and I, Adam Smith, who is the chair of the Taxation Commission in the House, we talked many times last year and also this year about what can the state afford. And we ran the runs. I mean, if you look at our profile, we're increasing our ending balance by $500 million a year until 2028. And I told Adam, I said, we could have a tax package between 500 and 600 million and we would be stable. And that's where he kept it at. And so that is a sustainable tax package regardless of all the rhetoric that's going around and that's being said that it's not going back to the tax plan of 2012. It's not going to break the bank. This is a sustainable tax plan.
Because we have money that if and when we do see a downturn in the economy, we will. And so we have money there. That's the difference between the last time. We didn't have the reserves. And so
1.8 billion in the rainy day fund.
Yeah.
Our savings account.
So Senator Billinger, Mr. Waymaster said it's a little iffy in the Senate. What do you think?
Well, when we voted on it originally a week or so ago, or a couple weeks ago, whenever it was, we were one vote short. But there's some new information come out. You know, as Troy has said, you know, the rhetoric is just over the hill because, you know, in her veto message, she says, well, we're going back to Brownback and this is an experiment. Okay, well, 13 other states already have this, so it's not an experiment. That's false.
What part do other states have?
The flat tax.
The flat tax.
Including
California and Illinois.
Right, and two of our neighbors, Nebraska and Colorado. And Colorado has their legislature is all the majorities are Democrats in the House and the Senate, and the governor's a Democrat. The governor has endorsed a bill that's in their chambers to lower their 4.4% to 4%. So Colorado's getting ready. There's a bill that they're working. We'll lower it, and the governor is supporting it. So we're talking 5.25. Colorado's already at 4.4 and wanting to go to 4. Nebraska is set to lower theirs by 2027, I believe it is. So it's nothing new. There's a lot of states using this. So, you know,
And we can say all of our neighboring states are at 4.4 and under, so way under the 5.25. And remember, we have 3 tiers now, 3.1 and the 5.75. So the difference that we're talking about is 5.25 to 5.75. Just that 0.5% right in there is the increase that is being discussed. So other than that, having a single rate is very simple. And as a business owner, I truly appreciate that myself.
Again, we want to remind you, if you have a question or a comment of any of our guests this evening, you can call us toll free. That number is 1-800-337-4788. We'd love to hear from you this evening. I thought we might move on to agriculture next, another huge area that involves especially western Kansas, Ken. And I know I read that, I don't remember if it was this week or last week, but you talked about the hemp issue again and how everybody was really excited about industrial hemp there for a little while, and there was a lot of activity there, and then it just kind of fell by the wayside. And apparently there were some factors of expenses involved that you helped cut those back a little bit.
After the session last year, we sat down with some of the industry stakeholders, and because they were concerned about how we move forward. Many of us have been supporters of it when it became a possibility to do research, and then now we went on to commercialization and trying to look at what is sustainable for the Department of Agriculture to manage the program. And that first couple of years, we had a lot of growers. I think that was part of the success. Then the market was just not much, and so we lost a lot, and trying to find markets for some of those end products. There's a processor in Great Bend processor in Butler County. Those are two probably the ones that are very active in the situation. Mm-hmm. They were the ones that really came to us, and other outside influence said, okay, what can we do? You know, the farmers are saying this is too expensive because it works maybe in some people's rotation as other things of what they do, small farmers, big farmers, whatever. And so what we have done in the House is we took out a lot of the other language that maybe they wanted, because we're not quite there yet with other means, but let's try and reduce the fees now, done about kind of in half of what it would be now to get a license to be an industrial hemp grower. There's still, you know, there's still a lot of situations where, you know, we have the fire marshal involved in some of these things, and safety is key in all this. And I think when this first started out, Becky, there was a lot of folks excited about the CBD and the oils and how to maybe get rich quick, for lack of a better thing, instead of those that were truly committed. And so that's what we're going to find out. If we have enough growers that participate, and then with that, then we'll see how the program goes. If it stays within the Kansas Department of Agriculture, it may go to USDA. Some states have USDA do it, but then again, it's a little bit different situation. But you know, Kansas really is a good place to grow industrial hemp because of our climate. But so we'll see if this will encourage farmers. I think the other thing we're going to see, Becky, I think we'll see an increase in acres because of the moisture we received. If I would have known it was going to start raining after the session last year, we should have quit in March rather than in May. But you know, everybody got rain, and we've had a good winter so far. I think our soil profiles are going to encourage producers and maybe encourage others to grow more hemp.
We'll see what happens. We have a caller on the line from Hayes. Betty, I believe. Your question, please.
Okay, I'm wondering why in the prisons or facilities in Kansas we no longer have an opportunity for the prisoners to take college classes. They do in many other states. I have a friend whose son's been in prison for over 20 years, and he has his degree, taken college classes all that time. But here in Kansas, we no longer have the state-supported education for our prisoners.
Which state that is? But
Who'd like to address that?
we do.
So,
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, we do have that opportunity for our prisoners to take college courses while they're serving their time. So I don't know if this is just some incorrect information that was relayed to Betty, but we do have college courses that are available as well as other courses as well.
Maybe not in every location, but I know a couple of our community colleges offer that through at several of them. Now, you may not be able to get your PhD maybe, but I know there is some. Now, if that's been a change, it's happened very recently. So that is available as far as,
All right.
to take that education.
Well, thank you for your call. And again, a reminder, if you have any comments or questions of our guests this evening, you can give us a call, toll free, 1-800-337-4788. Representative Rahjes, we might come back to you because you talked about the water situation, and I know rain's in the forecast for a good portion of our area this weekend, and hopefully we'll get some more. I think it will be pretty much welcome anywhere. But you, of course, with the Ag Committee, talk about water quite a bit, and there has been some monies that have gone to the Kansas Water Office and affiliated agencies to really take the situation of water quality and quantity statewide a little more seriously.
Speaker Hawkins, when he was elected speaker, decided that water was so important to make it its own committee. And so he appointed Representative Minix from Scott City to be the chairman. And he has led a bipartisan committee and through a lot of different things. They did a lot of educating last year, and we finally have a stable source of funding for the state water plan. And there was a few other things. This year there's a few other things. They're looking at different bills on how to do the right way to preserve water in the Ogallala and work on some quality issues. I think the biggest thing, Becky, as we look at all these things is that we have to take a honest approach to this and not just throw bombs and say, well, it's all irrigators' fault, because that's not the case at all. Irrigators have done a lot to reduce water usage. We were in a drought. We were in a drought for almost 5 years. And so even communities that didn't irrigate. But water in Kansas is more than just irrigation. We have industrial uses, we have commercial uses, we have uses in our metropolitan areas. The town of Caney had an issue. They ran out of water. They ran out of water. And so what the state is doing through different programs is helping small communities as well. And that's a program I think they're looking at, try to add more money as well to help these very small communities. Some of the ones we all represent, if they need, because they don't maybe have the wherewithal to help in their water supply or their quality of their water. And so, but the other thing is, we're continuing to work with our groundwater management districts on solutions, and that's where it should be. It should be with those. And then the other committees that are formed by locals. Local people are the best ones to handle these problems. We don't need it coming from Topeka or from some on-high committee. It needs to be done by those with boots on the ground, those that know this and have to live with those solutions. And so what we're hoping is continue to maintain that funding for all the different programs. We have a lot of programs. We have a lot of folks that have a piece in water. But the water's critical to all of us. We can talk about every program under the sun, but without water, we don't survive. And I think that's the thing that all the legislature has decided, and we have built many coalitions with our urban folks to know that water is important not only for those of us in the West, but those in the East as well.
You mentioned the small towns, and I know that when it comes to quality, a lot of the regulations are coming down from the federal government. That's expensive for a small town. And how is the state able to help pay for that?
Well, what the state is able to do, I think, in working with USDA Rural Development, we've been able to do that. We work together to work with Nicodemus to get a grant for their water system, and other communities like that. Those are the ones that don't have a grant writer, that don't maybe have somebody, and so it is, and we're looking at all those different things, but it's difficult for the state to get involved, and all of a sudden. We don't want the state to pick winners and losers, or who they're going to give money to, not to, unless there's the right kind of formula, the right chance. But we've seen that before, Becky, over the last few years. When we go through all these forms and all these different committees, where the money doesn't go? Many times to Western Kansas. And those of us that represent Central Western Kansas are tired of it. And we're trying to hold the administration and anybody else that does that feet to the fire and say it's money for all. And even though I know many of us out here, we don't want any sort of government help, but it's not necessarily help. What it is to keep our communities vital and strong.
Again, a reminder, if you have any questions or comments of our guests this evening, be sure to give us a call. We have a toll-free number that you can use, 1-800-337-4788. So Feet to the Fire makes me think about the Governor's Wildfire Task Force, and two people who are intimately familiar with the four-county fire that occurred.
Three.
Well,
actually, all four.
Yes,
All
actually,
four of us.
everybody.
All four of us.
And Representative Waymaster and Senator Bowers on that committee, and recently delivered a report. And Troy, you had some things, I think in general you agreed with a lot, but there were some details that you feel like are not there. Tell us about what you would like to see changed in that.
Well, some of the recommendations that was made by the Wildfire Task Force, I will say I do not agree with. And they were changes or possible changes that probably will not happen. For example, there was a recommendation to change the farming practices in the state of Kansas. And then it was getting into a crosshairs between tillage farming and no-till. And I think the recommendation by the majority of those serving on the task force really didn't understand the agriculture impact of the state of Kansas, and they were trying, and I will say, I think there were some individuals who wanted to assess blame. And when you have 100-mile-per-hour winds coming through in a once-in-a-lifetime scenario, I'm sorry, you can't assess blame. There's just no way to do it. So one of the things that both Elaine and I were focusing on while serving on that task force is not assessing blame or trying to find restitution for those that were impacted, but how can the state respond better? Because I will be honest, the response from the state was relaxed, and that's putting it in a very lightly term. It was terrible how the state responded back to not only the four-county fire, but we had fires all across the state of Kansas.
Yes.
And we were at a meeting just out of Salina, I believe it was November of 2022, and we were having a discussion between emergency managers, firefighters, the Adjutant General's office, an individual that lost his home in the fire, and I was, making comments and throwing my personal opinions into the mix and everything, and then I just decided, I'm going to be quiet. And I'm going to listen to all these different groups or these different individuals. And that's when I started crafting the bill that we heard in appropriations last week, which is House Bill 2468, which is a structured response from the state on how we address not only wildfires, this is any type of natural disaster. And the biggest issue that the state of Kansas had when we had the wildfire that happened in 2021 is that there was no accountability, none whatsoever. And this puts accountability on the Adjutant General, because the Kansas Department of Emergency Management is under the Adjutant General, and they are the ones that are supposed to make sure that we have everything in place. So when we need to have relief efforts, they have the other agencies and departments ready to go. They're also to make sure that the locals have everything in place. So if we need to address and try to access FEMA dollars, that is already in place, because the United States government has changed the way you access FEMA ever since Hurricane Katrina hit in Louisiana. And so it's not the same that it was prior to that. And they have rules and regulations that you have to adhere to, and if you don't, you can't access those dollars. And that was the main precipice of House Bill 2468, was the state has a responsibility to protect its citizens when we have a natural disaster.
Elaine, how do you feel about it? Are you in agreement with Representative
Exactly with
Waymaster?
Troy, and I testified after Troy in his committee too, and we understand there's some amendments that will be coming to fix a few things.
I
that
have
could-
one,
You have
actually,
one too,
yeah.
so, and that's what a bill is. You're finding a way to make the bill better, and that's a perfect way to do it. A lot did come out of this about how hard it is to find volunteer firefighters and how to retain.
The huge majority are all
yes.
volunteers in Kansas.
So we heard a lot from them that gave us a good idea of what it's like for our locals, and that was important. And touring and understanding the problem of where do you bury these cattle and how many can be in a pit. And Department of Ag talking better to the Department of Health and Environment, where the communication can be better. We can lay this out in this bill as well.
And that's one thing that happened after the 4-county fire. There was so much confusion because people were saying, oh, we can only bury 2 cows per pit. And then on a Sunday morning, I was on the phone with Secretary Mike Bean, who actually was the chair of the Wildfire Task Force. And he was getting in with KDHE to find out exactly what the regulations are. Well, it ends up being 50 cows per pit. But then they said, but if you go a little bit over that, we're not going to, penalize you for that. And it's just trying to have a streamlined effort so all the agencies are already in place, and then they can go out and say, this is the information you need for that particular wildfire is, okay, 50 cows per pit. Or the insurance commissioner is out there and saying, here, I'm going to help you with your insurance. Because when you lose everything, I mean, it's hard to say, what you had in every single room of your house.
Sure.
And one thing that was discussed when Vicki Schmidt was out there, the insurance commissioner, was, and there was a former insurance agent who said, what I do every 6 months is I take a picture of every room in my house. So I have a documentation of all the contents that's in my house. And I think that's something that the insurance commissioner should be pressuring and saying, hey, Kansans,
Good idea.
it's a simple effort.
Yeah.
Just take a picture of everything in your house so
Good
you
idea.
know what your contents are.
And we didn't mention funding, putting money into this fund so it's there for the future as well.
And that's the other important part of it. I know the Adjutant General's office, Ken, I mean, you were in committee when they testified. They focused more on the money than anything else. But it is setting up a disaster contingency fund. So if you have a small community like Paradise, who probably doesn't have the accessibility of funds to meet the federal match for FEMA, they can go to the State Finance Council and say, we need help to get these dollars. At the same time, FEMA has a threshold requirement that you have to have $1.4 million worth of damages before you can even access FEMA dollars. So back in the flooding that happened in Atoma in 2020, they didn't have that threshold met.
That's right.
And so they could not access any FEMA dollars. But with this fund, had it been established at that time, they could have went to the State Finance Council and said, hey, we need your help to access these dollars so we can tear down the homes that have mold and have been flooded. And so it's another step that we can assist the smaller communities.
Well, we appreciate both of you, your work on that, and we'll have you keep us updated on it. Let's go to the phone now. We have on the phone lines, John from Pratt is with us and has a question.
Yes, ma'am. My name is, I'm from Pratt County, in the Carl program with Ken, and it's good to see him again. My question was, what has the state done on the child care situation? Because it's got a huge impact on the economy of these small communities. And also, is the state going to offer any tax credit back to these parents?
That's a hot topic in just about every community in
Yeah, it
Kansas.
is.
And the governor's wanting to make one office of, I'm not sure the name, but regarding child care. Do we have money for it?
Well, and I served on the governor's task force for the child care. And really, I thought we were going to be actually administering and deciding a recommendation of the legislature on money that would go out in regards to addressing child care needs across the state of Kansas. However, it became very evident in the few meetings that we did have that the whole impetus of that committee was to create an entirely new agency and have a new secretary and a new cabinet member. And everybody on the committee was very ecstatic at the point that we're going to have this new agency. And I finally had to say, if you think we're going to be creating a new agency, you're fooling yourselves. It's not going to happen. We have duplication efforts in 4 agencies already. Within KDHE, the Department of Children and Families, the Children's Cabinet, and the Department of Education. All of them having some aspect with child care with the money that they're receiving from the state of Kansas. And so what the governor has proposed is actually she's not going to be creating a whole new agency. They're going to be consolidating all of those efforts into one existing agency. So it's not going to be creating a whole new bureaucratic system. It's going to be actually just consolidating everything. And we're probably going to be able to eliminate some FTEs and duplication of money, because these 4 agencies have been handling some aspects of it. And now with it being in one, it will probably be a cost savings in the state of Kansas. She does have $30 million for the child. I'm looking at Rick.
think
They're
it's a
grants for
grant
child.
program is
It's
what
a
it is.
grant program for child care. And then she also had in her budget that actually in our part of the state, $5 million to work with a foundation in Northwest Kansas in regards to child care needs, which actually came under criticism by an Eastern senator when we were talking about that. So there are items in her budget that are addressing the child care needs across the state of Kansas.
All righty.
I should say hi, John.
Thank you, John, for your call. We also have on the line now, Alan is with us. Alan from Russell, you have a question of our guest this evening, Alan.
Yes, I do. This is a question for Troy. We were able to get last year through for the disabled veterans to get the lifetime hunting and fishing licenses, and I was wondering if this year we were able to do anything with the state parks passes like other states have done. If you're 50% or higher, you can get a free lifetime state parks pass.
I'm going to say, because of a conversation that I had with Alan, that is the reason why we introduced the bill for the lifetime passes for disabled veterans. There has actually, I have to say, there has not been any discussion, as far as I'm aware of park passes for disabled veterans. I don't know if it's been on the Senate side.
No, we haven't heard it either.
I'm going to say I haven't heard anything about that. So that's something that obviously we can take back with us when we go back on Monday.
All righty. Thank you for your call. Senator Bowers, you had a couple of things that you were wanting people to be kind of updated on regarding some of the building and the structure in Topeka around the Capitol. Tell us about those.
Oh, yes, if you haven't been to Topeka for a while, the docking building is down, and boy, sunshine shining over on to the other side of the Capitol with that 12, 13-story building. So they're starting to build back now. So that's the docking building. But we serve on other committees, not just during our session, but on the off session as well. And one that usually just meets once or twice a year is Capitol Preservation. And that's one that I serve on. And last year I reported to you a movement to bring the Ad Astra statue from Salina, that's downtown in Bergman's studio, to the Capitol grounds to set on a pedestal that's been empty for 20 years. So this bill has passed, and now the funds have been raised, and we should expect in the spring to see the Ad Astra statue put on its pedestal in the Ad Astra Plaza. And before I was involved, people bought bricks with their names on for a donation into that fund for the plaza. So those will be laid as well. But something that came out of this that's really fascinating. Did you know we have this Liberty Bell that's stored in our basement? Don't know if I've told my friends this or not, but we've discovered on this committee, we were getting emails on why isn't our Liberty Bell being displayed any longer.
And you said, what Liberty Bell?
Yeah, what Liberty Bell? That's right. Well, we found it. It was on the grounds during construction. It was taken down, and it's in parts in the parking garage in a locked up room. And the tour guides do have keys, because what brought this to our attention, people are coming from around the nation to see this bill. And they don't care if it's in 4 pieces, they like to see it up, and we do go show it to them. So the Department of Administration is going to repair it and place it back out in front of the docking building. And hopefully we can have this done by next year, and it'll be a bell that we can ring even. There's 57 made, and they're across the states and located in different areas, and then our territories as well. So that's something historical that's being brought back out too. We're working on Suffrage Memorial Monument. It's a mural that will be on the first floor next to the cage elevator, but the design hasn't been perfected on that one yet. But also going to this committee, I wanted to mention a bill that was just filed this week. It's Senate Bill 431, and it's honoring Father Capon. And I know that's pronounced different ways in this area, but from Marion County, he was a farm boy. He died during the Korea War in a prison of war camp, and he was a chaplain, a minister, a father there. So his remains were brought back to Kansas just a few years ago. He's buried in Wichita, but he's up for sainthood. So we'll be following that along. So there's a bill that would go through the Fed and State Committee to Capitol Preservation to have a monument for Father on our Capitol grounds as well. So you might be watching for that one to pop up. That committee doesn't, we do a lot of work really quickly, but it's really permanent monuments that we see every day, and but ones that people are looking for when they come
And
to
really
the building.
represent and resonate with Kansans.
They do. And our Capitol is so well attended. People have a passport, a checklist that they're visiting all the capitals. They're visiting the Liberty Bell. So people are out touring with a mission. And this is what we're finding in this committee. So we're trying to promote our state in a positive way. And our Capitol is beautiful.
It is. It's very nice. Very nice. Again, a reminder, if you have a question or a comment of our guests this evening, you can give us a toll-free phone call. That number, 1-800-337-4788. Thought we might talk about education funding. We haven't really touched on that, and I wanted to talk to you, Representative Rahjes, because you, of course, are involved in that, and there's been some movement. Fort Hays State University, a very leading institution regarding nursing education, and the state has gotten involved and helped create the opportunity for more nursing students to be there. And that's a problem that we have, I think, nationally, but certainly in Kansas. We have a shortage of nurses.
Absolutely. We talk about education. I mean, K-12, that's we haven't had a lot of discussion there, and we can go, but if you talk about higher education, the state, the legislature, the governor have really made a commitment to the nursing programs at our universities, community colleges, tech schools. And so Fort Hays has a proposal to really revamp the nursing program and the building and more scholarships and more things. And so, and Fort Hays is also working with other institutions as well. And so this is good news for Northwest Kansas, for Western Kansas as a whole too, as this program continues to grow and develop. And so it's going to be exciting to see that go on. There's a lot of things with many of our universities trying to do some things. The one thing that's also coming up that I think has pretty much full support, and that's a center at the University of Kansas, for a cancer center that is a pretty price tag, but I think it's needed, and the progress we've seen there, and to have that research facility close to so many of us, even though, we may be a few hours away from Kansas City, but that's important. And so I think it's good that we have, over the last few years, really made a commitment to higher education and made some good investments and worked hard to keep tuition down. We did that for a couple of years, but with inflation, with other pressures, it goes up. I'm guessing it'll probably continue to go up just because of where inflation is. If you're sitting at 6, 7, 8%, that pretty soon adds up to real money.
Let's talk about the K through 12 budget. Where do we stand on that? Who wants to talk about it?
Well, I mean, if we talk about what was agreed upon between the legislature and the Supreme Court, which actually we're still, that's still pending. I mean, the Supreme Court hasn't necessarily signed off on everything. with the anticipation that if the legislature would ever change its mind, then we would be violating the law in regards to K through 12 education. But you have increases that are going into school finance. I mean, in the current fiscal year that we're looking at $192 million that's going to be going into K through 12 education. Next year, in fiscal year 2026, we're looking at $208 million that's going to be going into K through 12 education. And then in 27 and 28, an additional $125 million on top of all the money that we keep putting in. Now, there's going to be discussion in the legislative session of 2027, because that is when we're going to be talking about changes to the education finance formula. And so the one thing that has been brought up in the last couple of years, ever since we have had basically the adherence from the Supreme Court, is that now it's special education. And so we need to fund that. Well, with all these additional dollars that's going into the K through 12 education system, I think that can be offset. Plus, there was also an agreement from the 1990s that we were going to be receiving 40% of the funding from special education from the federal government, and we have never received it. And so now those advocating for the special education funding are wanting the state to pick up the entire tab. And so I would say, if you're wanting to see more dollars for special education funding, contact your federal delegation and see exactly why
Is
they
that
have
true
not
for
funded.
all states?
Yes,
Okay.
it's true for all states. The federal government went into this agreement with all the states. However, they said, yeah, we're not going to fund it. And so other states have either chose to fund it or not. But I would say I get in contact with your federal delegation and find out exactly why they have chose not to do it in the concurrent resolutions they keep passing.
Makes it tough on local school boards.
It does. My wife is a school board member, and there obviously is needs that need to be addressed. And in conversations that I have with her, I said, I understand that there needs to be dollars that's dedicated to special education. But again, we had this agreement with the federal government. And we could also go into the conversation of Medicaid expansion with that agreement too. But that might be that'd be a whole other episode on the Kansas Legislature. And that's why I think the state of Kansas has been hesitant on fully funding special education, because we had this agreement with the federal government and they're not putting their fair share in.
Well, we're starting to wind up our show this evening. We have about 3 minutes left, so if you have a question or a comment that you would like to make to our guests this evening, be sure and give us a call. That's a toll-free number at 1-800-337-4788. And Senator Bowers, I wanted to ask you, because I remember when we visited with you last year, this is something that you were involved with through the Utilities Committee. We talked about the wind turbines and the red lights that are on there, and it was
the blinking light bill.
blinking light bill.
So I knew there was a solution to turning off these lights at night. So new construction in this law will put on these lights that will turn off unless there's an aircraft 3 miles out. So there's new technology that does that. So new construction will have this automatic when the plans are put together at the county level. But then what the tricky one was, what do we do with the ones that are already up? Not to be penalizing them for following the law all those years ago. And the trigger for those is when their contracts are up and the electricity is bought again, the new buyer of the electricity understands that now they will put up the tower, which is about $1 million, and change the light kit in the top of the turbines. So that won't be immediate. I would say maybe in 15 years we'll see a quiet prairie, but we have to wait till the contracts run out, the new purchase agreements are made, so we will eventually see those off. But new construction will have these lights. It's not up in the northern part of the district in Republic and Washington County, or one of the first counties in my district to have this new technology. So it's very exciting.
That's wonderful.
And that is one of the biggest complaints that we heard was the lights are annoying.
You know,
And they are. They're strobe lights.
There is a simple fix. You know, the lampshade on the lamp, turn them upside down, set them on it. You won't see them from the ground. You won't see the blinking. If you're in an airplane, you'll see them.
And you
Pretty
told
simple.
me, you told me.
I told you that before.
Are you going to go put
That's a
those up
novel
there on the
concept,
towers?
I know, he told me.
Buy those in bulk too, I bet, huh?
Did you hear her say?
Did you
it was
just
$1
patent that on this show?
$1 million for a
million
tower.
dollars for each one? I mean,
That's right. This is a true farmer, right? Going out to build these parks.
Maybe we already have a bunch of them in the basement of the old docking building.
There you
We
go.
might.
We found
Locked
stuff
up.
there before.
So we might mention the unclaimed property
Yes,
fund.
I saw that this week.
When I got the new figure from our state treasurer, Stephen Johnson, who served with us in the House, and he's from Assyria, by the way, $575 million is what we have in the unclaimed property fund. And yesterday was Unclaimed Property National Day, and so they're recognizing it across the state. One thing I know, we're almost out of time, I've learned some of our banks, the physical locations are closing. So if people don't come in and get their items out of their safety deposit boxes, those items also go to the treasurer's office and are stored. And if they can't find the owner, then they go on this list.
So check the list.
Check the list, and we can help you with that. They will send us our list that we can help look for your names as well.
All right. Thank you very much, Senator Bowers, Senator Billinger. We've been visiting with Representative Rahjes, Representative Waymaster, and thank you so much for joining us this evening on the Kansas Legislature here at Smoky Hills PBS. I'm Becky Kaiser.